John McAfee was once famous for creating antivirus software that protected computers all over the world, but now people call him a fugitive, a madman, and maybe even a murderer. His neighbor was found dead, his dogs were poisoned, he had bodyguards who were ex-criminals, and a group of girlfriends, some who seemed to have tried to kill him. McAfee was running from the police, blogging and tweeting strange stories all along the way. But was he just a crazy man, or was he really smart and hiding something big? This is the wild and mysterious story of John McAfee, where nothing is what it seems and the truth is obviously a lot stranger than fiction. This guy is a bit strange. John McAfee's life was anything but ordinary. He was a tech genius, millionaire, international fugitive, and even a presidential candidate. To some, he was a visionary. To others, he was dangerous. His life was a mix of brilliance and madness, filled with twists and mysteries. It all began in 1945 when John McAfee was born. It all began in my childhood. He grew up in a home filled with tension. His father was an alcoholic who abused John and his mother. When John was just 15, his father tragically ended his own life. This left John deeply scarred. Despite the trauma, he tried to start fresh, going to college to study mathematics. But college brought its own troubles. John started drinking heavily and then using drugs. He was a broke student with expensive habits, so he began to sell magazines to make some money. It wasn't long before he found a more profitable, though illegal, way to fund his lifestyle. In John's own words, "I used to sell drugs because if you take enough drugs, the only way you can support your habit is to sell it to others." Despite his wild lifestyle, John was a quick learner. He taught himself the basics of computer programming, which landed him a job at NASA's Institute for Space Studies. There, he worked on the Apollo program. From NASA, he moved on to Silicon Valley, where his programming skills earned him jobs at prestigious companies like Xerox, the printer company. Very prestigious. But you know, I can't talk too much smack. I've never been hired by Xerox, so it is what it is. But John didn't enjoy corporate life. Very understandable. He drank heavily and used drugs, and even experimented with LSD and DMT during work hours. Not understandable. At one job, he drank a bottle of scotch and did his desk every day, and predictably he was fired. At another job, he took so much DMT that he couldn't remember what his job was and ended up hiding behind a trash can. That job also did not last very long. Yet none of that mattered soon because John had an idea that would change his life, and pretty much the tech world forever. In 1986, the first computer virus for IBM PCs appeared. It was called Brain. John was fascinated. He analyzed the virus and quickly created a program to stop it. It took him just a day and a half to develop the antivirus software. "I was reading about the virus and then it hit me," John later said. "I knew how to stop it. It was easy." At that time, most people didn't even know what a computer virus was, but John realized that if people became aware of viruses, they'd be scared of losing their data, and they'd want protection, which is pretty understandable. In 1987, John founded McAfee Associates and launched his antivirus program, VirusScan. John's strategy was brilliant. He offered a free trial to individuals, but charged companies for full access. To boost sales, he appeared on TV and used fear tactics to emphasize the dangers of computer viruses, which I'm not really sure if it's fear tactics because, now that I think about it, it's probably just the reality of the situation. Data gets held for ransom all the time, and it costs people a lot. Not to mention, whatever you're looking up, probably if people figured it out, it'd be a bad time for pretty much everybody. So by 1992, John McAfee's antivirus software was everywhere. That's why he stopped gooning. More than half of his Fortune 100 companies use McAfee antivirus to protect their computers. Businesses were convinced they needed this program to prepare for digital threats. John was making millions from the software licensing, but his big break came later that year. That year, a computer virus called Michelangelo caught the media's attention. The virus was said to lie dormant in computers, waiting for them to wake up on March 6th, Michelangelo's birthday, and destroy all the data on infected machines. John jumped at the opportunity. On TV, he warned that up to 5 million computers could already be infected without their owners knowing, and he based that on absolutely nothing. Panic spread quickly and people rushed to buy McAfee antivirus. But when March 6th arrived, the virus only affected around 10,000 to 20,000 computers, far fewer than John's prediction. Because once again, he based it on absolutely nothing. Critics accused him of exaggerating the threat to boost sales. Whether or not that was true, it worked. By 1993, McAfee controlled 67% of the antivirus market, raking in millions of dollars annually. And despite this, the company only had about 20 employees. John didn't hire professionals, he hired people he liked. The work environment was anything but normal. Scotch at your desk, cocaine lines everywhere. Employees slept at their desks, working around the clock. A former worker described it as borderline cult-like. There was even a group called Little Foxes where employees earned points for having intimate encounters in different parts of the office. What? Still, the demand for McAfee's software kept the money rolling in. When John took the company public, his net worth shot up to $80 million, but now that the company had investors, you had somebody to answer to, and they wanted to make it bigger and more professional. John absolutely hated the idea, but less than 2 years after the company went public, he sold his shares for $100 million and then walked away. With millions in the bank, John McAfee could retire comfortably, but wealth brought paranoia. He started carrying a gun everywhere and continued using drugs, which is probably where most of the paranoia came from, but this only made him more suspicious of everyone else around him. Looking for peace, John turned to spirituality. In 2000, he bought 300 acres of land in Colorado and opened up a yoga and meditation retreat. He invited yoga students to stay at his home for free and even wrote several books on the subject. Dozens of students came, drawn to his eccentric personality, but rumors spread that the yoga retreat was more like a cult. Honestly, not surprising. During this time, John discovered a dangerous hobby called aero trekking. It involved flying ultralight aircraft close to the ground over rugged terrain. The risks were high, but John absolutely loved it, probably because he had burned out his reward system at this point. So danger was needed to basically get any of the feel-good chemicals. He started a company offering aero trekking flights over the New Mexico desert. Tragically, his hobby would end in disaster. In 2006, John trained his 22-year-old nephew to be a pilot, but during the flight, his nephew crashed the plane into a remote canyon in Arizona, killing himself and his passenger, Robert, hopefully instantly, but you just never know with those. Since John owned the aero trekking company, Robert's family filed a $5 million wrongful death lawsuit against him. What came next would only make his story even stranger. By this point, paying the $5 million lawsuit might have just been easy for John McAfee, but he didn't want to. John believed his wealth had made him a target for lawsuits. Instead of facing the courts, he decided to flee to the country of Belize, where U.S. lawsuits would no longer apply. Before leaving, John staged a dramatic exit. He invited news crews to film the auction of his assets, including his Colorado yoga retreat, airplanes, boats, and estates. On camera, he had claimed he had lost most of his fortune. However, years later, John admitted that all of this was a lie. He said it was nobody's business, which arguably understandable, and the numbers he shared were random and meaningless, adding that no one should believe anything he said about any of his money. With his broken fortune story in place, John moved to Belize, ready to start a new chapter. At first, Belize seemed like the perfect retreat. John described it as a paradise where, with enough money, you could buy anything or anyone. He donated his guns and computers to the local police, likely to win their favor. In his early days there, John enjoyed a carefree lifestyle, spending his time snorkeling, relaxing on the beach, and dating multiple women. But John was always searching for the next big project, probably because of the brain damage suffered from doing so many drugs. The opportunity came when he met Allison Adonzio, and by the way, that's alleged. The brain just can become damaged if you use too much stuff. So, I'm not saying that happened to him, I'm just saying that does happen to the human brain. So, anyways, meeting Allison Adonzio, a Harvard microbiologist visiting Belize, which microbiology, as we all know, is pretty based. Allison had come to study local plants used by healers. These plants contained chemicals that could stop bacteria from spreading, and Allison dreamed of creating a new herbal antibiotic. When she shared her vision, John was immediately intrigued. He offered to fund the project and build a lab deep in the Belizean jungle. Excited by the opportunity, Allison then left her life in America to work with John, but soon, the cracks in their partnership began to show. Before any real progress had been made in the lab, John started inviting the press to Belize to showcase their revolutionary project. Allison wasn't ready, and there was really nothing to show yet. To impress the reporters, John instructed her to fill beakers with water and colored dye to make it look like they were making progress. As somebody who's from the lab, that's not a good idea. I'm pretty sure everybody doesn't even need to be from a lab to know that's not a good idea. So while Allison tried to focus on science, John became increasingly focused on controlling the local community. He hired over 100 locals to build a massive house for himself, paying them $45 a day, nearly double the local average. I guess that would make them pretty happy, but good lord. Anyways, at first the villagers admired him, but soon his actions began to raise alarms. John surrounded himself with bodyguards, men with criminal records who carried guns and dressed in camouflage uniforms. He called them his hitmen, and they acted like his private army. Everybody I hired was an ex-felon who spent half their life in prison, John later admitted. John imposed a 8 p.m. curfew on the nearby village of Carmelita, and by 9 p.m. his armed bodyguards patrolled the street looking for anyone who disobeyed. John claimed that this was to clean up the town, which he said was plagued by crime, but he never really explained his actions, leaving locals and tourists terrified. At night, people would see John walking the streets with a gun, flanked by armed guards. He also kept several vicious guard dogs that roamed freely on the beach. These dogs attacked multiple people, but when neighbors tried to report the incidents, nothing was done. Many suspected this was probably because John had paid off the police, providing them with weapons and even building a new police station. As John tightened his grip on the community, Allison began to fear for her safety. He talked about taking over the Belizean government, she recalled. He talked about his hitmen and how he could have people hurt or killed. Honestly, I was scared. Eventually, Allison decided she couldn't stay. She left the project, abandoning the dream that she had hoped to build in Belize. According to Allison, during this conversation, she mentioned having a headache, and John gave her 2 pills and a cup of orange juice. Shortly after, Allison passed out. The next thing she remembered was a disturbing scene. John was allegedly standing over her naked. She woke up the next morning feeling sick, dry heaving, and dizzy. She quickly grabbed her clothes and left, claiming she couldn't remember even taking them off. Back in the US, Allison reported the incident to the authorities, accused John of drugging and assaulting her. However, because the incident occurred in Belize, US authorities couldn't take action. John denied her accusations, dismissing her as irrational. He later said in an interview that Allison was a madwoman and claimed her story was entirely false, insisting he never had any sexual contact with her. After Allison left, the lab that they had been running in the jungle came under suspicion from Brazilian authorities, who believed John might have been using it to manufacture illegal drugs. A raid on the property uncovered several unidentified chemicals, but no illegal substances. No charges were filed, but the incident added to John's growing reputation as an eccentric and dangerous man, and probably the chemicals were just food coloring. Not long after, things took an even darker turn when John became linked to 2 deaths in Belize, one of which would make international headlines. John's paranoia about being robbed and attacked kept growing stronger, leading him to pay for extensive security. He even hired an armed officer to live on his compound for protection. Despite these measures, someone managed to break into his property and steal from him. Word spread through the local community, and John heard that a man named David Middleton was responsible. Instead of reporting the theft to the police, John allegedly decided to take matters into his own hands because he pretty much controlled the entire town at this point. Also, if the cops were working with them, why not just let them handle it? All of these. The absolute ideas of a madman, I suppose. It is claimed that John paid a group of men thousands of dollars to kidnap David from his home and teach him a lesson. A witness claimed that John ordered the men to intimidate David, saying, "Bring 3 tough guys to slap him around and teach him some respect." And this is all based on an absolute rumor. This guy could have just been chilling out. David was reportedly beaten and tased before being dumped in the street in front of witnesses. He was then rushed to the hospital, but his injuries were so severe that he slipped into a coma and died days later. And despite widespread rumors of John's involvement, the police took no action. Not long after, tensions escalated between John and one of his neighbors, Greg Fall, an American retiree. Greg had come to Belize for a peaceful life, but grew increasingly frustrated with John. He especially hated John's aggressive guard dogs, which roamed freely on the beach and had bitten multiple people. Greg would then confront John several times, urging him to control his dogs, but nothing changed. Finally, Greg threatened to poison the animals if John didn't take action. Shortly after their confrontation, John's dogs were actually poisoned, and John believed Greg was responsible. When someone threatens to poison your dogs and the next day your dogs are poisoned, it's hard to not suspect them, John would say later. The following day, Greg Fall was found dead in his home, shot in the head. John immediately became the prime suspect because when somebody threatens your dogs and then you get angry about it and then they end up shot in the head, that's typically how you become the prime suspect. And this would spark a massive manhunt. News of the case would spread worldwide, with headlines labeling John McAfee as a fugitive and a person of interest in an international murder investigation. Rather than turn himself in, John would flee. He claimed that he had nothing to do with Greg's death, but fled. Instead, he insisted the Brazilian government was corrupt and trying to kill him, but mistakenly targeted his neighbor instead. In 2016, the story of John McAfee would take an even more complicated turn when Showtime released a documentary called Gringo: The Dangerous Life of John McAfee. In the film, several of McAfee's former employees gave interviews where they accused him of hiring hitmen and strongly implied that he was responsible for Greg Fall's death. It seemed to paint a clear picture of McAfee's guilt. However, things got murky when those same employees later appeared on McAfee's YouTube channel claiming that Showtime had paid them to make those statements and that they weren't true. Now these individuals were insisting that John was innocent. One of them even said he would never, ever hire someone to kill another person. And I say it like that. I'm not saying it was forced. I'm not even alleging it was forced. I'm just saying, it sounds a little strange. But this raised even more questions. Could McAfee have paid them to recant their statements? And if they were willing to tell two completely different stories, could they really even be trusted at all? The answer is no. Even McAfee's girlfriend at the time really wasn't sure. She was quoted as saying, "When people asked me if I thought John killed his neighbor, my response was always, I don't know." The media followed this closely, and headlines read, "John McAfee is a wanted man. Once a Silicon Valley golden boy, he is now on the run in Central America." McAfee took deliberate steps to avoid capture. He dyed his hair, wore disguises, and pretended to be an elderly man with a walking stick, even faking a stroke to maintain his cover. However, true to his flair for drama, McAfee invited two news reporters to join him during his escape. He believed their presence would help him share his side of the story and offer some protection. The footage they capture would later become part of the Netflix documentary Running with the Devil: The Wild World of John McAfee. McAfee told the reporters he was being set up by the Belizean government, and I don't know if I said Brazilian earlier, hopefully I didn't, but it's Belizean, who he believed wanted him to be jailed, or they wanted to assassinate him, essentially. After hiding in the sand bunker for hours, McAfee then fled Belize by illegally crossing into Guatemala on a boat, thinking he was finally safe. But then, something ridiculous happened. The news reporters uploaded an interview with McAfee online, including a photo that accidentally contained GPS metadata, revealing his exact location. Metadata gives files authenticity, an expert explained, but part of that metadata includes geolocation. The photo's GPS coordinates gave him away. Suddenly, the world and law enforcement knew exactly where McAfee was, and within hours, Guatemalan authorities armed with submachine guns surrounded him, and Interpol agents and US officials were also close on the scene. Knowing he couldn't escape, McAfee did only what McAfee would do. He played the flute as authorities closed in. The news reporters captured footage of the surreal moment and his arrest. Since McAfee was in Guatemala illegally, Interpol wanted to deport him back to Belize, where he would then face questioning about Greg Fall's murder. But McAfee's lawyer told him he could file an appeal to avoid this. He just needed to buy some time until about 3 p.m. When asked about that later, he admitted, "Of course I faked it. What else would you have done?" He was then rushed to the hospital, delaying his deportation just long enough for the lawyer to file the appeal. Once that was done, Guatemalan authorities couldn't send him back to Belize. Instead, they deported him back to the United States, which was exactly what McAfee wanted. And just like that, John McAfee was back in America, a free man. Although Belize still wanted to question him, no charges were ever filed, and he resumed his life as though nothing happened. But the question remained, had John McAfee just gotten away with murder? John wasted no time settling into a new chapter of his life. On his first day in Miami, he met with a woman 38 years younger than himself, which, she was a former prostitute as well, and he would soon make her his third wife. That is a hell of a gamble. John embraced his infamy and then started a YouTube channel. His first video, How to Uninstall McAfee Antivirus, was a bizarre spectacle. Surrounded by scantily clad women, snorting bath salts and acting like a madman, John used satire to mock the media's portrayal of him. But many felt this parody hit a little too close to reality. In the video, John joked about his past, saying that 15 years ago, he had a beautiful software, but then it was taken over. He compared it to a time that he hired a Bangkok prostitute to do his taxes while he was with his accountant, calling it a terrible experience. Despite his antics, John was a media genius. He reinvented himself as a cybersecurity expert, warning the dangers of hacking and cybercrime. His wild personality now drew new attention, and soon his past as a murder suspect seemed buried under this newfound celebrity. On Twitter, he gained a loyal following for his bold opinions and wild conspiracies. In 2016, McAfee's fame had grown so much that he announced his candidacy for president of the United States. In 2017, McAfee pivoted to promoting cryptocurrency. He endorsed obscure altcoins on Twitter, causing their value to spike before crashing out. This pump and dump scheme reportedly earned him over $2 million, according to the Department of Justice. Now you see why everybody was upset at Elon when he called Dogecoin a hustle. Meanwhile, Greg Fall's family pursued a civil lawsuit against McAfee for wrongful death. While McAfee had fled Belize, making criminal prosecution impossible, the U.S. courts awarded the family $25 million in damages by default when McAfee failed to respond. Publicly, McAfee dismissed it, claiming, "I've been sued dozens of times and owe over $200 million, though he continued hiding his fortune through shell companies. McAfee's boldest move came when he publicly admitted he hadn't paid taxes in 8 years. "I have not filed returns. I have no intention of doing so. Come and find me," he taunted. Yes, taunt the American government. If there's anything they will find you over, it is taxes. You are an idiot. By 2020, the IRS was closing at sea, and McAfee fled the US once again, this time aboard a yacht he'd bought from the Wolf of Wall Street. Stocked with guns, drugs, and alcohol, McAfee then sailed the world running his 2020 presidential campaign from exile. Really surprised the ATF didn't get involved in this. For almost 2 years, McAfee evaded authorities while wearing disguises and randomly revealing his identity to fans. But to be honest with you, the candles burn quick when you're burning it at three ends. McAfee's luck would run out in October of 2020 when Spanish authorities arrested him. While in jail, he claimed to have insider knowledge of corruption within the IRS. Yeah. Yes, I'm fairly certain it does exist. But do you have insider knowledge? But this wouldn't be enough to save him. In June of 2021, Spain approved his extradition to the US, where he faced tax evasion charges. At 75, McAfee knew he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Hours after the extradition was announced, he was found dead in his cell. Now, I think we all know, kind of, it seems like when anybody who's high profile gets caught, that's what happens. Look, man, this is way above my pay grade, probably way above anybody listening's pay grade, but I think we kind of all have a sense that when you're playing at the top, the rules are different, I think. But anyways, officials ruled that John McAfee had taken his own life, but with his wife Janice insisting otherwise, this kind of created an issue. She claimed that McAfee was not the type to take his own life, and she had just spoken with him just hours before he was found dead, accusing US authorities of foul play. McAfee also had fueled suspicions years earlier in a tweet stating that if he were to die, it wouldn't have been by his own hand, and he would have been whacked. He also had the word whacked tattooed on his arm and launched a cryptocurrency with the same name. After his death, a post appeared on his Instagram account showing the letter Q, further sparking conspiracy theories. Even in death, McAfee's story remains completely bizarre. A Netflix documentary released about his passing included a claim from his ex-girlfriend who said McAfee had paid people to fake his death and actually he was still alive. The documentary also included a shocking claim that McAfee had killed his abusive father when he was young, staging it and taking his own life. The problem with McAfee's legacy is that it's nearly impossible to separate truth from fiction. If the allegations against him are true, he was responsible for multiple deaths and ran countless scams. Yet many still view him as a hero who exposed corruption and fought against the government control. By the end of May, McAfee had claimed that he had wired every computer in the government. He boasted that they had forgotten who he was and that he could get inside their computers and interfere with them, which is what he had done. McAfee claimed to have a dead man switch that would release damning information on global corruption if he died, but so far, nothing has surfaced. What's undeniable is that McAfee was a brilliant, paranoid, and manipulative man who lived a life so wild it feels almost fictional. Even after his death, his legacy continues to promote questions and conspiracies, but I think most of the thing is, how do you even understand what was going on in this man's life? We'll get to that in a second. So as for the antivirus company being founded, McAfee was sold to Intel many years ago for about $7.6 billion and is now valued to be around $14 billion. Millions of people continue to use this software to this day, a strange and lasting reminder of the man behind it. So it's kind of hard to tell what's truth and what's not with this guy. The biggest problem is that if he truly did have a dead man switch, the point of a dead man switch is to release information, or if for some reason you go out, this will automatically release. And probably how it works is if you don't log in for say 30 days into this account, then the account automatically uploads. Or let's say that you have some sort of, scheduling that if you don't reschedule it, eventually everything will drop. Now, you could run with the theory that let's say he was going to upload a YouTube video. Obviously, if YouTube was in cahoots, then they could go and stop the video from being scheduled or something like that. And really, like I said, there's no way to tell at the top what you can really find when it comes to basically dead man switches and that much money being played with. But the reality is that odds are, while maybe he was able to find some corruption and maybe some people would get their feathers ruffled over it, this guy had done so many drugs and had burned out his brain to the point that paranoia was just the way that he lived. It's undeniable, the town, Carmelita, that he was strangleholding the entire time, those people were dealing with real issues. And this David guy, David Milton, who got taken out due to this issue, these people, the rumors circulated. So this guy is not a hero. He was very, very much so corrupt. And when you're paranoid, you typically accuse people of what you're doing of the same corruption. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we can all probably guess the IRS the top of the government, anything that deals with that much money, there's gonna be a lot of mudslinging that could take place, and obviously people's reputations would need to be saved. So it's kind of hard to tell really, because I mean, I don't know anything about it. Most people don't. I don't even know if I want to know about this crap, because once you get up that high, what the money they're playing with is just insane. So for me personally, I think McAfee knew some things, probably not more than, you know, would have been really that valuable for the Spanish to just be like, oh, okay, see ya. Either that or the Spanish were strong-armed into doing it. Who's really to say? But did McAfee take himself out? This one is really kind of ridiculous. He's 75 years old. He could have done it because he felt that he was, you know, kind of moving things along or pushing the needle. But I tend to kind of think, you know, there has been documents released from the government themselves that have been declassified that have shown that things like this do happen. People do get taken out. So it's not really a conspiracy to be like, oh, nobody's ever been taken out before by an institution. So he definitely could have been. But ultimately, I don't think any of us are ever gonna know. So does it really matter? Probably. But are we really gonna have a solid answer on it? Probably not. But anyhow, I think I'm gonna wrap that up there. Thank you guys for joining me today. If you did enjoy, then leaving a like would be great of you, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. As always, I wanna thank my patrons real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Monkey Man, and Stupid Fox. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. At the first-hand accounts tier, we have Pimp Daddy Shamrocks and Yeeps. Actually, it's just Pimp Daddy Shamrock. I don't know where I got the S from. And at the second-hand accounts tier, we have Bianca, Fred Rush, and Troy. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support. It goes a long way towards me becoming the next McAfee. So thank you on that. I promise I won't have a town in a stranglehold, but you never know. Anyways, thank you for joining me today. I hope everybody enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.